FOMC, alright, so the Federal Reserve finally came out and they, well, happened to go up with a 25 basis point increment. So what does this actually mean? Later on, I'll be actually going through the entire report, especially the SCP, because that's what's most important. Okay, but first we have to talk about this 25 basis point increment. What does this actually mean for the market? So previously, if you were to look at expectation as it is, if the market were to, for example, if FOMC were to, for example, pause rates according to my expectation, if they were to pause, technically what they're actually putting out in the market, okay, what message they're actually bringing out to the market is saying that, okay, we do think that the bank might be in a little bit of a trouble. Okay, so we're going to be pausing rates and we're going to see how this actually goes on from here on out. That's what pausing would actually mean. If they were to go with a rates cut, according to Nomura, they actually expected a 25 basis point rates cut. Not hike, cut. Okay, so what would that actually mean for the market? It would mean mayhem. It would destroy the market. Why? Because a 25 basis point rate cut would mean that Jerome Powell and of course all his corresponding federal members probably think that this banking crisis is a lot worse than we all think. They might think that we need to go into emergency mode. We need to go into crash mode. We need to help everything. We need to bail out banks. We need to ensure that all the depositors are made whole. They have to go into this hyper emergency mode, and that would be really, really bad for the market. Okay? Thankfully, these two things did not actually show up. We now have to talk about the possibility of this 25 and 50 basis point increment. So if you were to get a 25 basis point increment, it simply means that the Feds just say, all right, we don't really care about this whole banking crisis. We think that the banks are fine, and we're just going to continue with this 25 basis point increment. However, according to the time where Jerome Powell actually testified in front of Congress, he actually said that chances are they might actually be raising even higher. A lot of people were penning down a possibility for a 50 basis point increment. However, if we actually see a 50 basis point increment, same thing, we will see a market collapse. Why? It's because it means that the Federal Reserve intends to Paul Volcker the entire economy. Back in 1970s, the same thing. I don't care about every other thing. As the Federal Reserve Chairman, I only got two mandates. My mandate is to ensure inflation goes down to 2%. And I'm not going to care about all this different thing. I am going to keep on raising rates until I get my 2% inflation. That is what most likely a Paul Volcker level kind of a chairman would do for the Federal Reserve. So apparently that's not what we got for Jerome Powell. We got 25 basis point increment, which I think it kind of went on with the same entire message that I was actually talking about, which is saying that, we're going to have 25 basis point increment, everything's going to be fine, okay? Banks are sound, according to Jerome Powell yesterday. He's saying the banks are sound. Don't worry about the banks, okay? There's not going to be much bailout needed. However, there's a lot of things that he actually brought up during this whole entire thing. But before I actually get to that, let's get into the SCP. Okay, so let's look at the SCP. Okay, right over here, you can see at first one, change in GDP. It went down to 0.4%. We were actually looking at 0.5% from the last SCP, which means that most likely in 2023, we are most likely going to be getting an even lower GDP, which is why the market kind of faltered a little bit. Okay, and if you look at the range over here, you can see that they're actually looking at a 0% to 0.8% in 2023 for central tendency. However, the range over here is where it gets a little bit more concerning. It is going to be a negative 0.2 to a 1.3. To have such a huge range, what it actually means is that recession is very, very close. Okay, I'm going to be talking more about that later on, what Jerome Powell actually said during the whole entire meeting as well. So next up, let's look over to PC inflation. This is actually pretty good. I'm pretty sure that the reason why the entire market kind of just shot up when the SCP was released was because of the PCE and also of the federal funds rate. Okay, so the PCE, they managed to actually bring it down for 3.3%, okay, which is surprisingly good because we are currently still at about 5% or so, which means that Jerome Powell and also all the federal participants probably see inflation going to go down quite hugely in the following months. They probably expect CPI and PCE to come in at about like 0.4%, 0.2% in the following months. Hopefully, even some disinflation or even deflation happening. So that's kind of where they're actually putting their projections out there right now. For December projection, they are projecting it to be about 3.1%. Personally, I think that this is very, very brave of them for them to actually reach a 3.1% December projection. Okay, now we look at the federal funds rate, and this is going to be the huge one. Because in the prior SEP, we actually got news that the federal funds rate was going to be 5.1% in 2023. And then in the Congress testifying thing with Jerome Powell, he actually said that there was going to be revision upwards. Okay, and so a lot of us were penning down 5.5, some even penning down 6% by the end of 2023. However, when the SEP actually dropped yesterday, it came out to be 5.5 with a December projection of 5.1. So for 5.1, what actually means is that there was no revision for the FFR, which is the federal funds rate. There is no revision for the federal funds rate. And what this actually potentially means, okay, let me just open it. Yeah, so what it potentially means is that for the Federal Reserve, they are most likely not going to be raising any more rates as aggressive as before. Because let's be honest, we had 9 meetings in 2022. And every single meeting was a rate hike. Be your 25, your 50, and 75 basis point increment. It continuously went up. Okay. Right now, we are finally at the the second meeting actually. The second meeting in 2023. And right now, in this meeting, we still have a 25 basis point increment. And right now, the FFR is going to be at 5.1%, and we are currently sitting at 4.825%, as it is. Which also, 5.8 to 4.8 to 5%. Yes, that's right. So that also means that we are only left with one more rate hike for the end of the year. And right now, we're only expecting another 7 more meetings in this year. So in these 7 meetings, what's basically going to be happening is that we are most likely going to have a pause, rate hike, pause, that sort of thing. Or it could also be a rate hike, and then you're going to pause all the way through. Okay? So this kind of just change up the whole entire thing. Because what we actually thought of a possible pause in this current FOMC meeting doesn't really matter anymore, because your FFR did not revise upwards. If your FFR was not revised upwards, it means that it doesn't matter that we get a pause today, we get a pause next month, we get a pause after, because we are most likely going to have 6 more pauses in this year alone. We're going to have 6 more pauses. It doesn't matter if you pause now or you're going to pause the next meeting. It doesn't really matter. Okay, it just means that we have one more hike to go, and the hike is not even going to be something scary. It's going to be a 25 basis point increment. The market is not going to be so concerned about this whole entire thing, which is exactly why the market went up. Okay, but of course, also on Instagram, I posted a story saying that this might be good based on SEP alone, which is why the market kind of rallied upwards. However, Jerome Powell can still tank the market, because there's still so many different uncertainties and what the different tonalities that the Federal Reserve wants to uphold during the Q&A. And that's where this kind of get more interesting. But before I actually get to that, let me continue with the whole entire report so they can get away from this thing, okay? So you can see that the FFR, the whole entire range was 4.9% to 5.9%. Even if you were to look at the bottom part, okay, if you look at the bottom part, well, most likely we are done. That means 7 whole pauses to go. This whole year we're done. We're completely done. Okay? You might add the fact that maybe we might, raise rates and then cut rates, but I don't think that's what Jerome Powell intends to do, because Jerome Powell have said it himself. He do not want to do a starting and stopping sort of thing. He wants to ensure that every single step of the way it is going to be firmly done. He do not want to flip-flop over it. He do not want to be like, oh, you know what, we're going to do 50 basis point and then we're going to cut 25, that sort of thing. Oh, he's not going to be doing that sort of starting and stopping. So if we were to be actually at 4.9% effectively, that means that we would be pausing for every single meeting from here on out till the end of the year. And if we were to take the higher number, which is over here, which is the 5.9, it also means that there's not going to be that much to hike, because effectively you are going to have a 25 basis point increment. Instead of 1 25 basis point increment. Effectively, this is not going to be helping and bring inflation down that much, I believe. But of course, right now, if we are expecting it to be complete pauses all the way to the end of the year, I think this is most likely going to be a lot better than we think. Okay, now I want to get down to dot plot. Okay, because this is very, very interesting for me. Okay, over here you can see the dot plot. Okay, it's quite a unanimous vote for all the participants to be going for a 5.1 federal funds rate. Of course, you have one actually plotting for a 5.85, or 5.9. I'm assuming that would be James Bullard, which is one of the most hawkish member in the federal board. There's 6 of them actually hovering in the 5.5 region. And one of them actually going down all the way to 4.9. I think for the one of them going down to 4.9 sincerely thinks that inflation is completely over, which is why they really want to bring it down. But I wouldn't really recommend us actually following the one at the top and the one at the bottom, most likely with the one where all the majorities are at, which is at 5.1. Which is why this dot plot actually gives us a good image of what the Federal Reserve is actually thinking about. Okay, so yeah, I'm pretty happy about this report for this SEP. Okay, so let's talk about Jerome Powell. How did he tank the market? He brings up the possibility of the SEP having more revision upwards in the future, which also means that this SEP, as important as it is, might actually be useless, because in the next quarter, where the next SEP comes out, he would most likely want to revise it either upwards, downwards. He don't really care. It's just that there's going to be new revisions coming in. So basically, SEP don't really mean anything. Even though this SEP is supposed to see 3 years down the road, but too bad we're gonna be changing it every single quarter anyway. It doesn't really matter to us. That's what Jerome Powell basically said. So that means that people who are really, really happy about the fact that, maybe we are 6 pauses in this. We have 6 pauses in this entire year, which means that we are probably good to go. That means we're going to the moon. Stocks market should rally up, no problem. Not really the case, because when we actually asked Jerome Powell, someone actually asked Jerome Powell, which is saying that did you actually consider a pause in this current meeting? He actually did say that it was actually heavily considered for a pause. Which, of course, this kind of brings in the whole fear that the Federal Reserve was also kind of worried about this whole banking crisis getting out of hand. That's most likely why they even have a possible, so-called a possibility of them actually even going that far for a pause. So that's definitely something that we have to also take into consideration. And also, finally, which is, Jerome Powell said that, the chances of any sort of rate cuts happening in this year is basically none. He's not looking for any rate cuts this year, which, of course, if you look at the federal funds rate, it means that we're most likely going to just have 6 pauses. But at the same time, it also means that if the moment we have to bring up another 25 basis point increment, he kind of almost promises no cuts. So if any level of increment is probably going to be there for a long extended period of time, and people are not liking it. Which is why basically after Jerome Powell finished talking about it all, the market basically just flushed all the way down. Okay, so it kind of makes sense. And one more very, very important thing that I really thought I want to dive deeper into this, which is the change in tonality for Jerome Powell. Because in the previous meeting, he was kind of he was hawkish, but at the same time he was very firm, and he was very quote-unquote confident, if you would like to go to that extent. He was pretty confident that we will get a soft landing, and he was like saying that it's alright, we have all the tools in our hands, and we will try our best, and we believe that we can actually attain a soft landing. However, in this current meeting, it seems that Jerome Powell kind of can't even find a path to this soft landing. It's not whether if we are going to have a soft landing or a hard landing. It just means that Jerome Powell can't even see the path to a soft landing. But of course, someone did bring up the possibility of, are we still expecting this inflation in the following months? And Jerome Powell was quite adamant, saying that, yeah, we definitely are going to be looking at this inflation happening in the following months, because housing prices are definitely going to be coming down, which is why you saw house sales, the home prices actually went down 14.5%, which is pretty good. So we're going to be expecting shelter prices in general to come down. Service inflation is definitely going to be coming down as well. So effectively, if all this sort of pricing are all going to be coming down in the next few months, that means that this inflation is definitely working. That means all this constant increment of rate hikes is finally working. We are starting to bear the fruits of its labor. But the thing is that right now we have more uncertainties. It's not just going to be inflation. It's not just going to be unemployment. There very well might be a banking crisis on the verge of this whole entire thing exploding. So one other thing, outside of this whole entire dual mandate that we have been talking about for the last 2 years, for this whole entire channel, I've been talking about this dual mandate for the longest time. But today we have to add in a third mandate for Federal Reserve, which is sort of doing regulatory work for all these different banks, because they are the central banks after all. Let's not forget, Federal Reserve Bank, they are the Bank of Reserve. They are literally the central bank. So they have to regulate all the banks. So what this actually means is that, because Jerome Powell kind of hint at the fact that maybe we are going to be having tighter credit line distribution, maybe we're going to be having tighter banking regulatory restrictions, be it your top 8 banks or the regional banks. All of them are going to be having different regulations coming in even more. And all these different regulations can come at a very, very small price, but at the same time slowly topple down this whole entire huge domino pieces. Because what happened is, for example, if a bank right now they are allowed to keep at least 1% of all their assets, and then kind of just lend out the rest of the 99%. Jerome Powell can kind of just add in a new clause saying that we only allow you to you must at least keep up to 5%. Okay, that means that you are going to only be able to lend out 95% of all the assets. Okay, and then the extra 4%. Okay, now that's going to be extra 4% of assets that could be generating a lot more capital and a lot more businesses for the banks, which means every single earnings quarter from there on out is going to be even worse. Whatever you were expecting from the bank is going to be worse. And if the banks are not doing as well, that means the businesses are not going to be doing as well, because they cannot borrow the money that's required for them to run the businesses. So you're going to have this whole new different set of problems if tighter regulations actually come into play. So I can see why the market kind of like flushed downwards again. But at the same time, if you kind of really digest the whole entire report, I don't think that the market should really be that upset about it. Personally, full transparency, I am pretty bearish on the market. Even as I'm making this video right now, I am still pretty bearish about the market. But I don't think that the market should be going down. I think that the market should actually be going up. I'm not going to lie. I think that there's not really that much bad news for it to really be bringing it down in the short term. Of course, we're talking about long term, that's going to be a whole different story. But if you're talking about short term, I don't see why the market should be actually going down. If anything, the market should be kind of going up a little bit until maybe the next significant report comes out, or maybe until the next time Jerome Powell comes out and talk about how hawkish he is for the market, or how disinflation is not going to be happening, or how the path to soft landing is nowhere to be found, things like that. Until we actually get that far out, I don't really see why the market cannot rally. Because the S&P is great. I'm not gonna lie, this is actually one of the best S&P we have seen in a long time. Because despite the fact that Jerome Powell is saying, oh yeah, we're gonna be revising it upwards, and then Jerome Powell kind of did not even revise it upwards. If anything, it just stayed the same. So I don't know. I think this is going to be very, very interesting. I think for the next few reports, of course, like I said, it's always going to be critical reports up next, especially for your CPI, your PCE, your employment reports, your jobs data, things like that. All these are all critical reports for the stocks portfolio. But I'll definitely keep a close eye on it, and also make this sort of summary video for you guys. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.